Hello everyone, this is Menz here. I'm going to be doing a Type 4 heavy armor breakdown in this video. This video is going to go hand in hand with a weak spot guide I have on my website, wakuru.com. You can find a link to that at the end of this video and also in the video description below here. So let's pop up the first little image I have here. This is going to be a pretty quick glance over the armor. If you want more like specific into each little detail, feel free to check out the guide on my website. But looking at the armor from the front here, you see that pretty much all of it is hard for lower tier tanks to go through it. The Type 4 and the Type 5 that follows it are pretty strong when it comes to armor. Being a tier 9 tank from the front here, the only spot that is really considered, I would say, weak. They're very tiny. Basically, looking here, there's a viewfinder from the side. It pokes out here. Most of it's space armor, and there's no, pretty much there's no hitbox behind it to cause damage. However, there's a small little sliver that technically you could hit, and it's anywhere from 152 to 209 millimeters effective armor. But actually hitting that is next to impossible from a head-on view. So I would just completely disregard that, but still have to point it out. But really the weakest spot on the front is the cupola. It's 200 millimeters effective on this very small sliver, as you can see here between the top part and kind of the bottom part. It kind of indents in. That's the weakest area, and a problem with hitting that is, you have to hit it dead center, because once you start getting to the sides, it goes up to 244 millimeters. Beneath it is 231 millimeters effective, and basically a lot of the armor around that is much tougher. So actually penetrating that's going to be a little difficult. So moving down from there, you're going to come across the front of the Type 4's turret here. So looking at the turret front, more or less the weakest area is 257 millimeters effective, this yellow area here. And then looking at the other little areas here, more or less the mantlet area is, it's kind of weak, but not necessarily the weakest. Not exactly the weakest armor on the front here. Now, I actually forgot to turn the front turret number 1 area. This is this little strip here that's next to the mantlet. So if you're aiming for the yellow area, make sure you don't aim directly next to the mantlet, because that's 287 millimeters effective. So not exactly the weakest area to hit. Premium rounds of course and tier 10 TDs can go through a lot of this armor somewhat effectively, but it's still not exactly the safest area to hit. Now moving down on the upper hull here, so starting in the center, it's basically 250 millimeters at this little yellow spot here in the upper hull. Not really easy to hit, but it is the weakest part of the hull armor on the front. Just barely a bit weaker than the lower glazes. But moving up to the main plate, that's 260 millimeters. And then once you get to the cheeks here, 283 is the weakest, and up to 289 on the upper whole little cheeks. The upper glazes here pretty much don't shoot it. 580, yeah, not even worth it unless you're shooting like straight down at it. And then the lower glaze is really big. It begs you to shoot it, but that's still 252 millimeters effective. So yes, tanks can penetrate that, mainly with premium rounds and also tier 10s, but it's still pretty damn tough and hard to get through for most tanks coming across the Type 4. Oftentimes, if you don't have premium rounds that can go through these areas, it's better to kind of throw HE or try to flank the Type 4, honestly. It's one of the slower tanks in the game now, and hell, the T95 feels freaking faster than it. But more or less, just popping out quick here to take that off. So if you're looking at the turret, what I was kind of pointing out, if I can get back over here, basically where these rivets are, definitely do not hit that. You want to hit the little triangular shape there. But your best bet for the most part from the front, the weakest area is the cupola. If you can hit it in the center, Don't shoot too high though. Stick towards the middle to bottom part. And there are a couple other areas to damage. But let's move on to the side view here. Let's get this as close as I can here. So moving on to the side, pretty much whereas the front armor is pretty damn difficult to penetrate, well, once you move to the side, it becomes much easier. As you can see here, almost all of the side is below 218 millimeters effective armor. You have a couple little strong bits towards the front here. The cupola is honestly, it's basically the same front, center, rear, sides, whatever. From any view, the cupola is pretty much the same strength, give or take a little bit. But mostly for the side, just try not to hit these little bit shaded in darker green here. That's track armor. It's a little bit tougher to damage, but really any tank that normally comes across the Type 4 can deal with the side armor. Once you start angling it, though, it does get a little bit tricky to penetrate, but you're still not going to have too many troubles with tackling the side armor. And then this view, the viewfinder here, if I'll just take this overlay off, it's basically this this little circle here that is pretty weak to damage if you're really struggling on penetration, but it is very small and actually difficult to hit. And finally, getting to the rear, much like the side, it's very easy to damage. The Type 4's rear, pretty much all of it is weak outside of the cupola and the angled turret sides. But more or less, Type 4, all of its armor is situated towards the front of the tank here. And yes, tanks are going to struggle with penetrating it. I'm just trying to line it up. They're going to struggle with penetrating it, which it kind of needs that because it's very slow. The gun isn't always the most reliable, but once you get around to the sides and rear, that's where you can tackle it as a lower tier tank. And oftentimes it can't point its gun down enough to hit small tanks. But from the front, tier 8 premium rounds and even some say 7s at times do have a chance to go through the front, especially if you pinpoint your shots. And tier 9 and 10 tanks will go through the front with some reliability because more or less you want to keep your frontal armor mainly pointed towards the enemy. More or less, if I can take this off, once you start angling here, that's when these cheeks are going to start getting weaker and people can negate any of this the spaced armor here and just start shooting basically at your side lower hull and go through here, and it's easier for them to penetrate that. You can angle a little bit, but for the most part, just let people shoot your frontal armor. That's your best chance. If they throw premium at you, try to hide. It's really the only suggestion I can give there. But anyway, hopefully you enjoyed this. Like I said, it should be popping up here any second now. There's going to be a link to the full article on the Type 4 Heavies weak spots over on my website, wattguru.com. There's also a link in the video description beneath this. And thanks for watching. Have a very good day. See you again sometime soon.